Welcome to Reality Talk America. So if you never heard of Thomas Massie before, he is a member of Congress known for challenging government officials during hearings and pushing aggressive oversight questions. Critics say major institutions lose public trust when transparency questions keep running into missing information or incomplete answers. Questions surrounding records investigations and what officials have reviewed continue driving public debate. Critics argue leadership figures handling sensitive issues should already know critical information before appearing in major public hearings. Others argue oversight exists specifically to expose gaps and force accountability. And in this clip, they finally get their comeuppance when pressure builds during questioning over names connected to the Epstein files and attention shifts toward who reviewed what information and whether key officials were fully prepared. As usual, let's watch the clip in full. I'm going to give you guys my thoughts towards the end.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Patel, I watched some of your Senate hearing yesterday when Senator Kennedy asked you, you've seen most of the files, who, if anyone, did Epstein traffic these women to besides himself? You replied, according to the transcript, there is no credible information that he trafficked them to anyone else. You also said somewhere in the hearing and here today that the problem is that the case files are constrained by limited search warrants from 2006 to 2007 and that the non-prosecution agreement hamstrung future investigations. Those constraints only apply to Southern District of Florida. They do not apply to Southern District of New York, the location of the 2019 sex trafficking indictment, which produced many things, including a series of FD 302 documents. According to victims who cooperated with the FBI in that investigation, these documents in FBI possession, your possession, detail at least 20 men, including Mr. Jess Staley, CEO of Barclays Bank, who Jeffrey Epstein trafficked victims to, victims including minors, such as Virginia Roberts Giuffre, may she rest in peace. That list also includes at least 19 other individuals, one Hollywood producer worth a few $100 million, one royal prince, one high-profile individual in the music industry, one very prominent banker, one high-profile government official, one high-profile former politician, one owner of a car company in Italy, one rock star, one magician, at least 6 billionaires, including a billionaire from Canada. We know these people exist in the FBI files, the files that you control. I don't know exactly who they are, but the FBI does. Have you launched any investigations into any of these people, and have you seen these 302 documents?
Sir, I have asked my FBI agents to review the entirety of the Epstein files and bring forth any credible information. And we're working with Congress not only to divulge that information and produce it to you, but any investigations that arise from any credible investigation will be brought. There have been no new materials brought to me launching a new indictment.
So is the loophole here, or is it your assertion that these victims aren't credible, that the 302s maybe didn't produce credible statements that rise to a probable cause?
It's not my assertion, sir. It's the assertion of two different United States attorneys' offices from 3 separate administrations who investigated those same materials in lifetime.
Are the 302 documents in the FBI's possession?
They reviewed all that, yes, sir.
And so have you reviewed those 302 documents where the victims name the people who victimized them?
If I personally know, but the FBI has.
So how can you sit here and in front of the Senate and say there are no names?
I said
I named one today.
I said we are not in the practice of the Department of Justice FBI of releasing victims' names. That is not what we do. We are also not in the habit of releasing incredible information. That's not what we do. But multiple authorities have looked at the entirety of what we have.
Okay, I got to move on here. Were you present when the AG had the White House event when she released the binders to social media influencers?
I was, yes.
So if you're willing to meet with social media influencers who stood to benefit from the sensational and sad stories of these victims, will you meet with the victims as well?
The FBI will meet with anyone who has new information.
Will you personally meet with them?
The FBI and the professionals who are handling the cases will.
Let's break down what just happened. Patel had told the Senate the day before that there was no credible information Epstein trafficked victims to anyone else. Massie's first move was to separate the Southern District of Florida case, the one constrained by the 2006 and 2007 search warrants and the non-prosecution agreement, from the Southern District of New York case, the 2019 indictment. A completely separate set of files, a completely separate set of 302 documents. A 302 is an FBI witness interview report. When victims cooperated with the FBI in the 2019 investigation, agents recorded what they said in these documents. Those documents are in FBI possession right now, and according to those victims, at least 20 men are named inside them. Massie read the list: a Barclays CEO, a royal prince, a Hollywood producer, a prominent banker, a government official, a former politician, an Italian car company owner, a rock star, a magician, at least 6 billionaires, including one from Canada. Then he asked Patel directly, "Have you personally reviewed those 302 documents?" Patel's answer, "No, but the FBI has." Then Massie asked a question that matters. "How can you sit here and say there are no names?" Patel's answer, "Multiple authorities across 3 administrations reviewed the same material, and none of it rose to the level of prosecution." That is not the same thing as saying there are no names. Prosecution and disclosure are 2 different questions. Massie was not asking whether these people were charged, he was asking whether their names exist in those documents. Patel confirmed they do. He just had not read them himself. Now watch what comes next.
Were you instructed that it was important to release the documents to the Oversight Committee on the day of my introduction of the discharge petition to release these files?
I don't know what day that was, so no.
Well, they were released that day, and there were victims' names who weren't redacted because they were in such a rush, and the victims are not happy about that. Have you investigated any of the CIA connections? Have you seen the CIA file on Jeffrey Epstein? And if you wanted to see it, would they show it to you?
Well, I can speak for the FBI, and that's presuming there's a CIA case file, and I've reviewed everything that the interagency, not I, the FBI, that was provided to us.
Would you be willing to look at the CIA file on Jeffrey Epstein?
If there is such a file, and if it has not already been turned over to the FBI will look at any new investigative leads.
Welcome to Reality Talk America. Today we are talking about a congressional hearing exchange that is creating major debate because it touches on transparency, accountability, and one of the most publicly scrutinized criminal investigations in modern American history. The moment centers around Congressman Thomas Massie and FBI Director Kash Patel during questioning connected to records involving Jeffrey Epstein, and what information federal investigators have reviewed related to people potentially named inside. Investigative files. The exchange became attention-grabbing because Massie pushed directly on whether the FBI had information connected to additional names tied to the Epstein investigation, and whether leadership had personally reviewed those materials. Patel responded that he had not personally seen the specific documents Massie was referencing, and stated that multiple offices across multiple administrations had reviewed materials connected to the investigation already. Now this is where the political temperature immediately rises. Because whenever public officials say information exists, but leadership has not personally reviewed specific materials, people immediately start asking bigger questions. Should leadership already know? Should those records already be fully understood? Should controversial investigations receive greater public transparency? Those questions quickly become larger than the hearing itself. Massie argued investigators possess records connected to victim interviews that could contain information involving additional individuals potentially connected to Epstein-related activity, and pressed Patel on whether active investigative action existed surrounding those allegations. Patel pushed back strongly. He maintained there was no cover-up. He argued prior reviews occurred across multiple administrations. He also emphasized that protecting victims remains a central concern in handling investigative material connected to sex trafficking cases. And politically speaking, this becomes important because public trust often depends less on whether people agree and more on whether people believe institutions are being transparent. Americans watching hearings usually are not watching legal procedure details. They watch confidence, preparation, directness, whether officials appear ready for difficult questions, whether answers sound complete, That perception shapes political reactions very quickly. Massie has become one of the louder congressional voices demanding broader disclosure connected to Epstein-related materials and transparency surrounding what information remains unreleased or redacted. Supporters argue greater disclosure builds trust. Critics warn public discussion around names and records requires caution, because investigative documents can contain references, context, witness statements, and material that does not automatically establish wrongdoing. That distinction matters. Being mentioned inside investigative material does not itself prove criminal conduct. Investigations involve interviews, allegations, leads, and evidence review processes that often require significant context. And that reality sits directly in the middle of why debates surrounding these files continue generating enormous public attention. People want answers. People want clarity. People want confidence that powerful institutions apply rules consistently. That expectation crosses party lines. Republican, Democrat, Independent. Trust matters. Transparency matters. Accountability matters. And moments like this spread quickly because they create something audiences remember. A direct challenge. A disputed answer. A question people believe deserves more explanation. Some viewers walk away believing Patel handled the hearing responsibly by avoiding statements about materials he had not personally reviewed. Others walk away believing leadership should already know every major detail surrounding a case carrying this much national attention. That disagreement is exactly why exchanges like this keep becoming headline political moments. Because when oversight hearings end with major questions still hanging in the air, public debate rarely slows down. Usually that is when it gets louder.